Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our talk. I am your moderator, Fatma. I will be making my introduction first, and then I will introduce our panel. So I am a historian by profession, but over the past 2 years, I've been doing research in shrine culture and also how, in specific therapeutic practices, how they kind of work out in BPAC Tamil in specific. So I will go on to my panel now. Daheem Deen is a marriage family therapist practicing in Lahore for over a decade. She works with couples, adult individuals, and families. This is Daheem. Jasmine Khwaja is an integrative psychotherapist with her master's in training from Australia. Her practice in Lahore over the last 8 years specializes in working with adults and couples as well as supervising therapists in training. Mariam Suhail is a Fulbright scholar and a marriage and family therapist. She completed her degree from Northwestern University and now practices as a supervisor, therapist, and consultant in Lahore. Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Is this good? Okay. So while all three of us got together and we were kind of like brainstorming about what to talk about because mental health is such an overarching topic, we will try to keep it short and specific, and obviously we will have 20 minutes at the end for question and answers. So you guys are welcome to pick up anything that you find interesting as we go along, and you can ask us towards the end. Does that sound good? Okay. So when we talk about mental health, often there's a general perceived narrative that mental health and South Asian culture are somehow at odds with each other. And I think that for those of us who have gone to therapy or those of us who aspire to go to therapy or have to navigate family to go to therapy, often have to deal with this question of, okay, log kya kahenge, ya, how do we ask, how do we tell people that we go to therapy? And I think that this is a very, people perceive that there is a stigma. So I think that I would like to start off with our panelists kind of, giving us their take on why do you think that people believe that there is a stigma around mental health in Pakistan, and do you think that really it is at odds with South Asian culture? Daheem, do you want to go? Or Jasmine? Yeah.
All right. Hello? Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay. This question about integration it's specifically actually really close to my heart because I'm someone who grew up in a home with a Caucasian white mother from Australia and a father who has his origins from a village in Punjab. So I think unconsciously my whole life this idea of integrating cultures has been at play in my mind. Specifically mental health. So we pick up this construct, this westernized idea of therapy, and we seem to think that it's this individualistic idea, and we bring it to a collectivist society like ours, and how does it actually play out? Yeah. Is there resistance? Where does it flow? Where does it break down? There are a lot of facets to this, and I think one thing that gets addressed time and time again is the stigma. It's completely relevant, it's very important. There is a huge stigma, and I think we could talk for hours and hours about the stigma. But one thing that we hardly talk about is the integration.
Right.
How close is therapy to our culture, and why is it not talked about more? So one facet that's actually overlooked is when we come into therapy, there is a resistance in general because it feels like we're going against this collectivist norm. Why do we need to go to a therapist and embrace our individuality? And is that threatening to society at large? Right. And often it is. Even people who make it into the therapy room, they come in with all kinds of preconceived notions and resistances, ideas about how does this play out in my marriage? How does this play out in my religion? What does it mean that I'm here? And one of the things I'd really like to talk about is how process-based therapy, which is an idea that two people in the room come together. You come into therapy with me and we develop a relationship, and it's the alliance and the work that happens and transpires between two people is not actually an individualistic process. It's you recognizing your emotions, your way of being within a relationship with me. It's me experiencing you, and then it's you experiencing yourself through my experience. One thing that we as therapists know is that the more you look at your own emotions, the more that you can own your own identity, actually the stronger your relationships within community develop. And so this idea that therapy is in some way a resistance to collectivist cultural ideas is just completely false. And I think that's something that needs to be spoken about more. There needs to be more of a dialogue about that. And there are multiple facets to that, which we can go into.
But another thing that I picked up from your question is that dichotomy between East and West, and therapy originated in the West, how do we apply it here? And that is something that even my supervisors in the US kind of spoke about. What would you do with this degree in Pakistan? I mean, people don't come to therapy, you know, you won't have work. So, I mean, and in my personal experience, that was something I was very passionate about. I went all the way to the US to learn that, right? And I believed that it works here. That's why I chose that degree, right? Because we were trained here in a very clinical model, like go to hospitals, work with patients for 10 minutes, and then patient after patient every 15 minutes, right? So that kind of medical model was the most prevalent model here in Pakistan. And when I was working at the hospital, I was so dissatisfied as a practitioner, right? Okay, somebody's coming in, they're not coming in for a clinical reason. They're coming in because they have a problem with somebody at their house, you know, they have a problem in their relationship. They're not getting along with their family, right? They have come in and they're aching because of that, right? I'm not gonna diagnose them, I'm not gonna tell them, oh, okay, you're depressed, go take these medicines or do this relaxation exercise and you're gonna be fine. So that made me look for a program. I didn't know that marriage and family therapy existed as a program, right? Just that experience made me look for something that there has to be some relational, you know, therapy that existed somewhere, because this person is not aching because, you know, they're just depressed. They're aching because their relationships are suffering. So in that way, it was a very Eastern model, like it originated from our very own culture, right? People were suffering within their relationships, and that is not a unique thing. You know, in every culture, there are people who are going to be suffering relationally, right? And there has to be an alternative to this clinical diagnostic method that is primarily used. And so when I practiced in the US and then I came back and I practiced here, I don't see a lot of difference in terms of the therapeutic process. There are elements in the culture that are different here that you start to explore when somebody comes in versus when you're practicing in the West. The process is the same. The process is a very open-minded exploration of a relationship. If it is between two people, which is a couple, or it is between family members, or if it is between, you know, within yourself, the internal relationships that you have accumulated over life. So I don't see a lot of difference over there.
I think, Mariam, what you're talking about is, you know, referring to this word stigma.
Right.
For the longest, it's been, you know, mental health is seen as mental illness.
Yes.
So people are very resistant to कि जी दिमाग ख़राब हो गया, psychiatrist के पास जाना पड़ेगा, दवाई लेनी पड़ेगी, you know. But in my practice, I've been here for over 10 years now. So US की जो practice थी, even जब से मैं यहाँ आई हूँ, the trend has changed, really. You know, people are not coming in just कि depression है, clinical depression है, या OCD है, obsessive compulsive disorder, but people are coming for stress, or people are coming for relational problems, जहाँ पे, you know, the father and the son is not getting along, or the couple is not getting along. So आप कहो कि therapy का जो focus है ना, the use of therapy has actually changed, which is why like the relational therapy word comes up so much, which Mariam was talking about, कि it's about actually healing the relationship. And a lot of people are coming because of that. So stigma, अभी भी बहुत से ऐसे लोग आते हैं therapy में जो they don't want to be seen when they're walking out. Because you know, the idea of, oh, they have something messed up in their mind is still prevalent in our society, but in my practice for over 10 years, it's changing, you know, and that's, I think, where we're integrating. The integration has already begun, because, I mean, I've seen there's so many people coming in कि हमें therapists कम पड़ गए हैं लाहौर में, मुझे लगता है. Kyunki people are coming in, they want to sort their relationships out, they want to talk about what's stressing them, all of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you speak about relationships, right, and you're talking about a collectivist society, what do you mean by a collectivist society then? In specific, like the way that our family is structured, or?
Yeah, so a collectivist society is a society in which I identify myself via my relationships with others. So I might be a wife, a mother, a sister, a homemaker, a daughter. And an individualistic society is where I identify myself with values that are more intrinsic. And so when we look at society here, we are definitely a collectivist society. And one of the key things that I think comes into the therapy room while working in a collectivist society is shame. Shame is a huge theme because collectivist societies are shame-based societies. And the way that shame operates versus guilt is that shame actually has the threat where you can be ostracized. So if I am not someone for someone else in my role, then where does that leave me in community? And I think this is the fundamental sort of ideological clash between therapy and a collectivist society. Right. So what happens when I really come into myself and I really own my own emotions and I really overcome maybe things like shame? Where does that leave me in a space with my other relationships? But the integration is actually a dialogue that says, the relationships, even if they're going through a transition, they can be more authentic, they can be stronger, they can have various boundaries, and they can still be intact, and this collectivist society can still exist in its form, but perhaps without shame.
Right. So I think that's one way that this resistance to mental health manifests within the therapy room, right?
Yes.
Are there any other ways that when you guys meet clients, what other ways do you feel that they're resisting or that they're resistant to the idea of therapy?
So sorry, another theme that comes in with collectivistic societies is the fact that in a collectivistic society, I meet your need and you meet mine. Right? In an individualistic society, I am responsible for meeting my own need, right? And when you start the therapeutic process, what you're encouraging is for them to meet their own need, right? So by that process, you're actually also implying that people around them will also then have to meet their needs by themselves, right? And that is a huge resistance in the system. So the person you're working with, they will start to kind of over time be more mindful of their own needs, try to address them on their own, and that will shift the focus from the other to themselves. It will be a problem for the other, right? And that is when the system gets a bit threatened, and there is a resistance to, jab se tum therapy pe jaane lage ho, so you've become so self-centered, and that is a question that even people in the room struggle with. But isn't that selfish? Isn't that going to make me a bad person?
And it probably gives rise to other feelings like guilt,
Yes, exactly what Jasmine was talking about, shame and guilt for taking care of oneself. Because that automatically kind of removes you from taking care of others, and then others project that guilt onto you in the system that, okay, you're not meeting my needs, hence you are not a good person. It's a very unconscious process.
Yeah. So I think what Miriam's actually saying is, yes, there's so many layers of stigma, but even for the people who make it into the therapy room, even for the people that we meet, that we engage with in therapy, their resistance is there that pop up. So just being open to this idea of therapy, it doesn't make it resistant-free from some of the cultural conundrums that we face.
Part of one of the big tenets which, for therapy is the integration of self. So when you're coming from a collectivistic society, that self is so divided. There's so many parts which you identify to, but not really integrate. So that's one of the resistance a client really feels within themselves, that you're coming in, you're bringing your whole family in, all those parts live inside you, और फिर उसको आपने face करना है, उसको explore करना है, उसको recognize करना है, उसका aware होना है. So that in itself is a very overwhelming process, and as a society, that self is not encouraged. You know, तो वो though it is existing there, it's there, but उसको encourage नहीं किया जाता, उसको different path, different roles के साथ identify किया जाता है कि आप ये हैं, आप ये हैं, आप ये हैं, जिसकी वजह से फिर जब आप therapy में आते हो, तो then you kind of, you know, look at all of that, and at the same time, what you're basically questioning is the family systems you're going to go back to.
Right.
And it's not just, you know, there, it's transgenerational too. It is not something to you know, you're bringing in yourself, but you're actually bringing in generations and generations of shame and collectivistic thought, soch, which you're coming in with. So the process in itself is actually overwhelming, you know, and it's very gradual, it's very slow. It's not something that you can, you know, it's not something जो आप मतलब इतने आराम से होता है. It's a तकलीफ दे process. Where you're questioning what your forefathers have actually handed down to you.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that what you're saying also is that when you are in the therapy room, it's not only that you're working with the self, but you're also working with an entire structure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
The
Right?
culture is present in
The
the
culture
room,
is present in the room.
subculture is present in
Absolutely.
the room. So there's a lot that you're working
And so you're not
on.
only engaging with, okay, what are the needs of the individual, but then you come into conversation with what are the needs of the family, what are the needs, and then how does your client in specific factor into that family system?
Yes.
Could you speak a little bit about how that changes your practice then? Because that's also a very South Asian, not very South Asian, but it's also, I mean, our family structure is specific.
Right.
So I think that most of that work you guys have to do on your own then, right? Like,
Oh, well, yeah, well, one of the things that I feel is, yes, over here it's much more predominant of what's happening externally. But I think it's a global theme where what's happening externally is a reflection of what's happening internally. But over here, sometimes what we do in the way that we speak and the way we use language and the way we use ideas is that we put a lot of focus on the external.
right.
And so to work with that is a little bit different than when you're just looking within. But to work with that in a way that what happens when what you're facing externally comes into contact with what you're carrying internally, and then how do you feel and actualize within that? Rather than just to focus on the external world and what that's doing and how we can shift it, and sometimes circumstances are rigid, but it's really like, what is that external world full of various circumstances, people, emotions, what is that doing internally, and how do these two things come together?
So like basically when, you know, a very common scenario is this person triggered me, you know, my mother-in-law triggers me, I can't look at her, I can't be around her, right? And it's very common and it's okay to get triggered, but we don't stop there, right? We understand what within you gets triggered. What is happening around you is not okay, yes. But within that, when you're placed in that environment which is triggering you, what within you is getting triggered.
Right.
And that then, you know, brings the focus back to what is happening in the internal family structure, which then gets really projected onto the external family structure. Because in the West, when you work with an individual, they're so far removed from their families, in most cases, that they're really, you know, struggling with whatever is happening inside, still related to the family maybe, but the triggers are removed from them. Here, the triggers, we are living with the triggers, right? So it is difficult to handle that on day-to-day basis, but it also is an asset in therapy, because when a triggered person walks in, there's a lot more work that can be done, rather, you know.
You
so
can
I think-
identify what the problem is.
Yes,
and
so I
transfer.
think that is a strength in this society, that, you know, we kind of live in a family structure that triggers us, but at the same time gives us strength, and also gives us an opportunity to reflect on what we are, who we are, what's happening to us, why.
So one of the aspects of therapy is also responsibility of your own self, you know. So it's not, therapy is not a place जहाँ आप आके सिर्फ complain करते हैं और vent करते हैं और catharsis करते हैं. It's not just that. So you're bringing all your family in, and you're bringing, जिस तरह मरियम कह रही है, you trigger, you bring in, different instances about the family, you bring in different members of the family. But at the end, it's about taking responsibility. So you explore, you understand, you become aware, and all of this gives you, actually puts you in a place of responsibility as to now what you want to do and how you want to proceed from this point on. It is, it's not just कि आप you just talk about it and you say कि ओ ये पास में मेरे साथ ये सब कुछ हुआ था, मैं इस तरह की situations को face करती हूँ या करता हूँ, और तो अब मैं क्या करूँ, मेरे बस में तो कुछ नहीं है, it's all about the external. No, it's not really. Therapy का बहुत बड़ा process जो है integration, अपने therapy को अपने अंदर integrate करना, or as a individual integration into that system, back into the system, comes with a sense of responsibility towards your own self, once towards your own self, then towards the system. Because again, once you can recognize what you're bringing to the table and how you can deal with it, then you can accommodate the other person also. So I think responsibility is a very important bit,
Fatma, I know that you had some questions about therapy and religion. And so maybe before we come to that point, one of the things that culturally I think has been over the generations, a divide here between therapy in this process-based therapy and South Asian culture, is that there is a power differential here. So when people go in looking for therapy, they're often have imagined that there is a higher up doctor type figure who can treat you.
Right.
And this is what I really want to challenge here in the kind of therapy that now we're practicing, where it's more of a human to human connection. And I know we're going to speak a little bit about language, but just to introduce that, there is, I'd like to actually check in with the audience before I answer this. Okay, what is the Urdu word for therapy? The translated Urdu word, does anybody know? Or any ideas? Anyone? Since we have many fluent
We have
Urdu
someone
speakers
there.
here, anyone, anything?
Take a guess. Nafsiyat
Okay,
Ilaj,
yeah.
that's the closest.
Right.
That's the closest, probably.
That's the closest, and that brings in this word ilaj. Now, if we retranslate ilaj back into English, what would we call ilaj in English? Treatment, right? So somewhere in the language, the essence of this process-based therapy is lost, and again, the power is placed back into the practitioner. And I'd like to really challenge this by sharing that one of the things that I face when I have to do something like this, public speak or give talks, and as much as I do it, is that I come into contact with my own shame. And it doesn't really manifest in my mind as shame, but it's just a discomfort. And the reason I want to share that is because it's so important in this process-based model of therapy to see that it's not a perfect, educated, in this expert coming that you're coming to get treatment. It's a human-to-human thing, and the less we sort of otherize and colonize this idea of mental health and how it should be, the more integration can actually take place.
Right, absolutely. And if we come back to integration and this human-to-human contact that you're speaking about, and while all three of us, when we first met and we talked a little bit about my research, so my paper essentially was titled In Search of Sukoon, the Everyday at Bihi Pak Daman. So I'm not sure how many of you know about the shrine Bihi Pak Daman. But what I was looking at was that why was it that there were so many female devotees going to the shrine itself? What kind of violences were women dealing with in their everyday lives that they had to go to the shrine? And what was it that was happening at the shrine that was providing them sukoon? Because a lot of women would go there and say that, Bibi hamara sahara hai, Bibi samajhti hai hamari takleef ko. And so for me, and there are a lot of scholars that work around the shrine as a space of sanctuary. And the shrine is a space of, therapy almost, especially for women who do not have access to therapy. So my questions then for this talk also stem from the same place. That there are questions or that there are places that therapy or the process of therapy in South Asia are happening, but we do not identify them as such. And if they are happening, how are they happening? And to what end is it happening? And I think that all three of our panelists will have a lot of things to say about this. So I think that maybe you guys could speak a little bit about how South Asian culture has actually been doing therapy just in different ways and in different pockets in of itself. And how does that process look, and how is it similar to therapy?
It's interesting that you say this because I think for the longest, therapy has not become, again, I speak from my experience in the past 10 years, people have really started coming in. And I see it as parallel to the structures of our society is changing. So जो हमारे पहले structures थे society के, उसमें कोई ना कोई बड़ा होता था, या कोई neighbor होता था, या कोई group होता था जिधर जाके you would went and you would talk and you would get some sort of advice back. So there are two things that I would bring up. One, this dynamic, the one you were talking about, shrine, like you go and you have faith, there that I would say this, मैं ये दुआ मांगूंगी और मुझे तसल्ली हो जाएगी. So that's first step of actually therapy, the catharsis, that you just let it out, so that has been there. But since the structures of our society is changing, a lot of need for these pockets are becoming smaller. These pockets are actually becoming smaller, so need for therapy is increased. And the difference I see in therapy and this collective society is that therapy का focus individual की growth के ऊपर बहुत है, and eventually the integration is with the society, So it's not like हमारे culture में वो एक one-up position बहुत रही है, unconsciously it's there. That we go see someone, we talk to someone, they have like they would have something to say, but at the same time it's very healing also, because whatever we are storing inside, we're actually able to say it to the other person. And one of the first steps is listening. When you go to a therapist, the process of getting to know yourself doesn't start immediately. It's actually the listening which is therapeutic. It is having that connection. So that has been in our society for a very, very long time. It's been there.
Yeah, and I think this question that you raised, Fatma, is really important for two reasons. One is that actually unconsciously we already as a culture and society identify with the need for therapy, but it's taking place in different forms.
Right,
because
yeah.
your research says that going to these shrines, it has a therapeutic element. And the more we kind of acknowledge that, the less alienating and westernized this idea of therapy is. Right. But at the same time, there are clashes between the God construct, religion, and therapy. And time again, you'll meet people who say, well, if only my faith was stronger, I might not have to be here. I might not have to be in therapy. And sometimes it feels like a direct sort of violation against your religious beliefs to go and seek this human help. For me personally, as a practitioner, I feel like there's so much space. Part of the unconscious integration that we do working here is that there's so much space within the therapy room for your God. And how religion is for you, how your relationship with your God is. And because myself and Mariam and Dahim, we supervise other therapists. I've noticed that therapists they come back from abroad with their training, and they're very hesitant to engage in any dialogue about religion with their clients. But over here, it's such an integral part of our way of being that there needs to be a space for that. And when we can do that, when we can integrate in that way, it's much less threatening. That it's human to human, and your God and your relationship with your God has a space very much here within the therapy room.
Right.
Yeah, relationship or lack thereof.
Yes.
Either way, right? Either way, it is something to be explored, right? Because a lot of people, it's a very sensitive and relevant issue when people walk in. Because historically, religion has also been a means of control. And people have experienced that as such, right? So it kind of helped them explore that your relationship right now is with control, not with God.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And how that helps them kind of be more engage with religion freely, you know, either
Right,
way. So
right.
that has been also, and if you kind of steer away from that all the time, then you're missing out that relational dynamic with control that, you know, is not existing otherwise in their surrounding, in their dynamic.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. More often than not, your perceived relationship with God is so important in your therapeutic process.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I think that people at first are scared because, I mean, you're challenging, and it's the same thing with family, right?
Yeah.
When you start to challenge authority figures, when you start to challenge, and it's terrifying because then where am I if not, if this is not my relationship with my family, right?
Right.
And I think that goes back to what you were saying at the start when, again, we're such a collectivist society that you are not only an individual, but you're also a daughter, you are a wife, you are a mother, and then within the South Asian context, that comes with so many burdens and other like complicating relationships that it's very difficult for you to maneuver around. Yeah. So
Sorry, I wanted to add to the access of therapy that you were talking about. That
Earlier,
why
yeah.
is that happening? At shrines, and how it is different from what we are doing here. Because I personally feel that therapy is a very limited access product.
absolutely, yeah.
So, which I have a huge problem with, right? So, and I think that therapy itself, therapeutic process is not limited to what we are talking about, right?
Right.
It is not limited to the therapy room. It happens culturally, grieving happens in bigger groups, change, all of those processes that we're talking about in here are not limited to the therapy room and the therapeutic process that we are talking about.
Right.
However, we haven't tapped into that yet, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a language barrier. All of us who are trained in a process-based
Yeah.
therapy model
Yeah.
are trained in English.
Right.
So when we have to translate it for somebody who's not that well versed in English, and I don't mean academic English. People here know academic English, but if you emotionally want to ask them कि आपके क्या आपका इस बारे में like just to translate, how do you feel about it? It has so many different ways to say that in Urdu, right? So that we get stuck. So
Yeah,
that's
and again, at the
another.
start, you were also, I mean, when we were discussing this, you also said that there was 8 different ways to say child sexual abuse, right? In Urdu.
Yes. In Urdu, there's so many different, and in English, it's very like clinical. We say, okay, pornography, molestation. That when you translate that in Urdu, you have to look for technical terms, right?
Yeah.
And those technical terms, if I say those to people who talk in Urdu, they won't know them.
Right.
Yeah. So there is real dearth of not having a language for therapy
For
in
therapy.
Urdu. So that is a huge challenge.
And I think eventually, when there is some kind of integration, or if we're looking for it or hoping for it, it's not just a translation that needs to take place. It's when the translation takes place, there's a transformation that takes place, because more and more research shows that the way we experience emotions is so closely linked to language. So when it's integrated into your own cultural language, ways of therapy and ideas of therapy will evolve organically.
Right. Mariam, you had an example about this, I think. You're also a marriage counselor.
Oh yeah,
counselor,
right.
So-
So I have tried and worked, I have worked in a lot of community settings, government schools, government organizations, NGOs, hospitals, and kind of taking therapy to them in the way that they'll understand, kind of make it easy for them and kind of help them learn the basic therapeutic skills, right? And of course, I'll translate that, I'll take it to them, but how they picked it up was amazing, right? How you just give them like this exact thing that, okay, how do you feel about it? And they'll come up with like 8 different ways to say that to their clients, you know, to the people they're working with,
Right.
because it's you know, if you're an intelligent human being, you would be able to do that process on your own. So the only thing that's lacking in here is that, you know, kind of taking this process to a wider audience.
Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
So one thing that I would want to add is we're talking about, you know, how to take the language of therapy to access that. But I mean, you can take it a step backwards, is actually adding that language to our everyday use with our children and between, you know, with our spouses. Because therapy is actually a relationship, and when you explore a relationship, you don't have to be actually in a room. You know, when you talk about your emotions, you don't have to be with a professional. When you talk about your fears, your vulnerabilities, जो चीज़ें आपको are seen as weakness, you don't have to be in a therapy room. So language जो है ना हमारे culture में मतलब emotions को recognize करना, उनके बारे में बात करना, उनको इजाज़त देना, उनको emerge करने की, it even goes backwards to that level. Because for us to, you know, you don't, like, people don't have to be coming in therapy to actually get to know themselves. मैं for initial bit जब मैं काम यहाँ शुरू किया तो मैंने बच्चों के साथ बहुत काम किया. बाहर भी जब मैंने काम किया तो I was working at a school. Mostly I worked at schools. I would always tell the parents that ये मेरे साथ घंटा गुजारेगा हफ्ते में. That's it. He or she's going to go back to the house. And you know, you are the primary therapist that they have, and not like a detached, unbiased therapist. Obviously, I completely understand that. But आप बच्चे से बात करें, so the more skills I was giving to the parents than to the child themselves, you know. So the language has to actually come घर के अंदर. जहाँ पे इमोशंस के बारे में बात हो सके, एहसास के बारे में बात हो सके, ये बात हो सके कि बच्चा चाहता क्या है, उसको वो स्पेस, I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, what I'm saying is right, you know. In the morning I had this conversation with my older one. We got into a tiff and that's exactly what he said, कि ये आपका लेंस है, ये मेरा लेंस नहीं है, you know, और आप इस लेंस के साथ बैठेंगी. So I heard that in the morning, you know. So I'm still recovering from that. But he was right, you know. So उसके बाद फिर कोई आगे conversation चल नहीं सकी मेरी तरफ से.
Yeah, and there's research across cultures that shows that where certain words don't exist to identify emotion, we're unable to actually identify that emotion, or we perceive it differently. And just the process of identifying mentally an emotion that you're experiencing within yourself and being able to give it a word is very powerful. And these are the kind of tools I think we're talking about, you know, within families and within systems that we need to start making more accessible.
And integration will automatically happen, you know. Mental health therapy will not be this big of a hava जो बना हुआ है इस वक्त. Integration will start happening at the houses, and people would access when, you know, when अगर आप सोचें आप अपने बच्चे के साथ ये conversation कर रहे हैं, अपने शौहर के साथ ये conversation कर रहे हैं, तो at some point अगर आपको लगेगा कि आपकी conversation नहीं हो रही, तो आप ये भी कह सकते हैं कि, you know, I want a third person, I want to talk to the third person. वो shame नहीं रहती उस चीज़ में, क्योंकि आप अपनी shame से निकल आए हैं ना. अपने जितने एहसासात हैं जो आप छुपाते फिरते हैं, अपना एंगर किसी के ऊपर जो छुपाते फिरते हैं, आप जब उसमें से निकल आते हैं तो फिर आप थेरेपी को भी एक्सेस कर सकते हैं.
Right, okay. So I think the other question that all of us have been also dealing with and also very interested in then is that how does this transformation happen? You know, so I think Mariam was talking about this, and she was saying that, you know, a lot of times it's not about translation, but it's also about transformation, right? So we do not have the words, but once we pick them up, once we pick up certain emotions, then the practice also changes, right? And that you were also speaking about I think that you said that in Multan you gave some kind of like training and workshop. So could you speak about how that went? Yeah.
Sure. So there's a Women Against Violence Center in Multan set up by the Punjab government, and they actually get a lot of couples and families Any time when there's a domestic violence case, they can come in, and it's a one-stop shop kind of a thing. They have therapy, they have police intervention, they have lawyers, they have medical intervention, all of that. So I was training their therapists who were local therapists, clinical psychologists from the universities around the area, and they were not well versed in process-based therapy at all, right? But from their, they were working with those couples for so long, they had some kind of latent knowledge of what needed to happen. So I heard them, I was like, okay, so when they come in, do they talk to you or do they talk to each other? They were like, madam, wo humse hi baat karte hain. I was like, okay, so just to start with, can you ask them to talk to each other? They were like, acha theek hai, to sahi hai. So then they had a live session in front of me, and they conducted it so powerfully, and I couldn't have done that. I don't have the language for it. But they have the language, they have the experience, all they needed was the right direction, right? They were very easily, they were able to get the sexual, intimate details out in Urdu, which I still cannot do. Okay, I have to refer to English for any kind of, sexual experience, intimate connection. I don't have a language for that in Urdu. But they were able to do it so quickly and so with so much ease because it was their language, it was their experience, right? However, a point to mention over there was I had to give them a sex education class. The clinical psychologists themselves, they had very little knowledge about the sexual process, and they were conducting marital therapy, where a lot of cases were coming in where the intercourse wasn't happening, or the intercourse was too painful, or something really terrible was happening in the sex lives of those people, and out of those 8 girls, only one of them was married, and the others didn't have the relevant sexual knowledge to approach that. So the first day of the training, I went back to their teacher. I was like, "Aapne mujhe kya train karne ke liye bheja? I have to conduct the sex education class. So give me one more day so that I can invest that, time into sex education. Then come to the therapeutic interventions and da 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 da." So that speaks to a real dearth of what Daheem was saying, not having a language for your experience, right? That being covered with so much shame. That language might exist in the academics, कि जी किताबों में लिखा हुआ होगा कि इंटरकोर्स के उर्दू में क्या कहते हैं और उसमें क्या क्या स्टेप्स होते हैं और किस तरह से होता है, किताबों में लिखता होगा, लेकिन आपस की बातचीत में वो टॉपिक उस तरह एक्सेस नहीं होता, राइट? So वो बहुत clearly सामने आता, and I was like, all right, so that was a real issue.
Yeah. So I think when we speak about integration and then integration of mental health within a South Asian context, but also specifically in Pakistan, it is not that it is incompatible or that they are at odds with each other, but that we have always been doing therapy, but in different ways and through different means, like the shrine or online spaces, or maybe this term called behenchara, or but also that there isn't a language for it, and there needs to be work, and that when we give them that language, like you were doing during your workshop, is that local therapists really pick up on that, on those concepts, because those concepts are compatible with the way that our society is organized, which is a collectivist society, that we relate to each other through such strong bonds of relationships that we understand that what it means to be in a therapy room, or that what it means to interrogate those relationships.
Gender, do you want to talk about gender?
Yeah, we had a gender question, but we're short on time, right?
I think we can leave it to the audience.
Yeah, we can leave it to the audience. So we're gonna, we have our last 15 minutes. Yeah, so we're gonna open for Q&A, and then maybe, we can go forward. Okay, yeah. Oh, I have to choose.
Hello. I wanted to ask you about the everyday emotions that we all experience, like sadness, anger, happiness. At what point should we recognize that those emotional reactions, which are normal and healthy, move over to a mental health issue? Because I think this is quite an important area to to look at. And it's probably why a lot of people come to mental health therapy or intervention, well, not too late, but later rather than earlier. So I'd be interested to hear your views about that point in which you think this should be recognised and how you can help ordinary people who are not trained as professionals like all of you to recognise that.
So, to begin with, as I said earlier, we don't talk about emotions. So it's such a mystery and it's such a ये तो बात ही नहीं करनी, इसको तो express ही नहीं करना, it's such a not accessed area that it's actually right. People when they experience all these emotions, the internal gauge to actually understand where are they and what are they going to be doing and how to express it, वो exist ही नहीं करता. तो फिर when and a lot of people come in because उनको खुद को नहीं पता चल रहा होता मगर उनको feedback आ रहा होता है, कोई relationship affect हो रहा होता है उससे, या उनकी अपनी functionality affect हो रही होती है, मतलब उनका काम करने का अंदाज, उनके relationships affect हो रहे होते हैं. So that's when they come in. So how do you differentiate? So we go to the grassroots level where you start talking about emotions. They're very normal to feel happy and angry and upset, and that kind of builds that internal gauge within yourself, your self-reflection capacity. और इसके लिए आपको बहुत बड़ी साइंस नहीं रिक्वायर्ड है एक्चुअली, इसमें बहुत कोई डिग्री भी नहीं रिक्वायर्ड है, इसमें कॉन्वर्सेशन और एक बंदे को स्पेस देना रिक्वायर्ड है.
एक very small measure is that when there is that big D, we call it dysfunction, right? So if I'm upset at, let's say, with my father, I speak to him, I yell, he yells at me, and then it is resolved, I feel better. Then there's no dysfunction. There was anger, there was eruption of that anger, there was drama, but there was no dysfunction, right? So you need to know when your emotions are turning everything into a dysfunction around you, right? That there's an emotion that's building up, you're not even taking it to the relevant person, it is giving you panic attacks, you're having palpitations, you can't show up for work, you're not able to talk to people socially. That means there's dysfunction. So when there's so much dysfunction, that's an indicator that your emotion now needs some kind of clinical intervention or need to go to therapy.
Yeah, and actually I would say that you are your best guide. So how are those emotions impacting you? How are you coping with them? Are you feeling like you're struggling? And sometimes just entering the therapy room doesn't mean that there needs to be some kind of a diagnosis around those emotions. It might just be like you're struggling with an acceptance of those emotions, or you're struggling within your family system with a resistance against those authentic emotions. And even just to identify these things can really regulate emotions. So I would say you are your best guide. How are you feeling? If you're not coping, it doesn't necessarily mean like there needs to be intervention, but therapy can help. I think you're in charge of this.
I don't like it.
My name is Shahab Ansari. I'm a correspondent for the last 25 years, working with an English newspaper, The News. My question is, since we have got so very eminent and prominent people sitting just in front of me, our society is facing a very big problem. My children as well. We live in the third world. We've got so many taboos around. I would like your advice to tell us how to make our children aware when they're growing up, boys and girls, about those very sensitive questions which they have in their minds, but we don't have this privilege in the schools or anywhere else to make them aware about these things, like sexual problems, like for a girl and a boy, and we just snub them. We just stop them from talking about these things. So what course we should take?
So I'm going to ask you something. 2 words. Advice, he's asking me. And at the end, आपने एक चीज़ कही, हम snub कर देते हैं. आप इन 2 चीज़ों को इकट्ठा कर लें, आपको खुद ही रास्ता पता चल जाएगा आपने कैसे उनसे बात करनी है. So why don't you tell me that how you would take this on with your child?
Generally speaking, that's what we've observed in many families and everywhere else. Almost 99% families do not like this kind of talk from their boys and girls.
100%, and that's exactly what this conversation of integration has been about, is that you go back and when एक client भी जब आता है तो हम ये सारा transgenerational ये challenge कमरे में आता है और ये बात होती है और यही आप बात कर रहे हैं कि घरों में होता है. So how do you like stop this behavior is through awareness, through these conversations that we're having right now here.
But yeah,
Sure.
Right. I understand. So Rahim earlier was saying something about listening to your kids, right? So this barrier happens also because of shame around this topic and also because you are relationally not on the same page, right? When they talk to you, you don't hear them, right? Because your interests and their interests are so different. So it's like entering their world somehow. You need to find a way to enter their world. When you do, you don't have to be judgmental, right? तो ये क्या है? You know, ये ऐसे तो नहीं होना चाहिए. That will shut them down. So start from the non-sexual space and then move towards the sexual space, right? It will be easier for you as parents to do that also. Start from a more neutral ground that you feel comfortable approaching.
And talking to the child in the language they understand.
Yes.
You know, अगर आपके पास 4th grade का बच्चा आके कहता है, ओ मामा क्लास में आज एक गंदा लफ्ज़ यूज़ हुआ. अच्छा जी, गंदा लफ्ज़ क्या था? SEX. अच्छा जी. So अब 4th grade के बच्चे को SEX के बारे में आप वही समझाएंगे जो उसको समझ आएगा ना. So that's very important कि as a parent you can talk about these but in a language that they understand. Not in a language which is overwhelming or underwhelming कि ओ थोड़ा सा बता दिया और फिर you know kind of squiggle away.
but also I'd like to add that when we're faced with these situations, really ultimately it's our own shame that is being challenged. So when your child brings up something and you wind up shaming them, it's because there's something within you that's uncomfortable. So this question that you're asking, it's really widespread. You're really saying, how can we help culture, society, the system? But maybe one small, tiny way to start, which might have a ripple effect, is in your own home. First with your own self, and then within your child. So if you have accidentally shamed your child when they come to communicate to you, the first question to maybe not ask is, well, what should I say? How should it be different? But it's to look at what within me is experiencing shame that I responded in this way.
So one sort of critique of therapy from sort of a more radical bend is that, you know, what therapy does is sort of it takes disaffections that are very structural, issues of patriarchy, socioeconomic class, and sort of reintegrates individuals that would otherwise be sort of arguing for a more political position, but reintegrates them. And I'm wondering sort of how do you guys experience sort of issues of patriarchy, class, gender, sex, and politics in therapy? Thank you.
Yeah, so that was actually something we wanted to speak about in detail today, but we didn't, we ran short on time. So I think this idea that emotions are very private and personal and they're just from within you that's almost in a bubble. So to think that state and systems and culture and gender and generations of the way things have been do not affect our emotions is a little bit false. One of the things that I'll just gently give you an example is in our culture, the way women receive inheritance in the subcontinent, the way women receive inheritance. what that does is there's this idea that if you don't have a son and your husband passes away, you're at a major disadvantage. Okay, so there's generations and generations of that going on. What happens is that breeds insecurity. So I don't want to box any stereotype, but one theme that emerges often that you see is that, well, you need to have a son. You're maybe in an insecure position till you have a son. What actually happens when you raise your son with all that insecurity, okay, through their life, all that expectation? So I'm not going to answer that part, but fast forward, you're the therapist and you have a couple in front of you. And maybe the man presents with a lot of power, there's a lot of inequality, there are all these things that we would say are gender stereotypes. When we strip away those gender stereotypes, when we strip away that power, you might actually be working with insecurity. So the gender stereotypes, they're so important, they're so prevalent. We could probably spend hours discussing what they are. But at the core of therapy is when we strip past those layers, it's a human to human, emotion to emotion, and really then gender doesn't actually quite matter.
Okay. You see, mental health has become the 5th most common non-communicable disease now, and it is accepted all over the world. Actually, we have been discussing this part of the world. You being professionals may have been brought up exactly here or abroad. आप लोगों को क्या identify कर पाए कि why this change has taken place in this society? I'll pick it up from what Jasmine said last, insecurity part. I belong to that age group where I would say it's more lack of patience, increase in intolerance, disintegration of the family structure. Previously too, our mothers, our wives, our sisters felt more secure than what the girls are feeling right now. In spite of the fact, in the West, what Jasmine said, that security part, the financial securities, the inheritance securities, all are different, much different than what we have them here. There it's 50-50 or maybe sometimes more. But here it is according to the Sharia, mostly. You didn't want to discuss about it, but that's a fact which has to be talked about. आप लोगों ने क्या ये चीज़ को प्रिवेंट करने के लिए कोई चीज़ को आइडेंटिफाई किया? बिकॉज जितनी भी नॉन कम्युनिकेबल डिजीज़ को डिस्कस किया जाता है उसमें प्रिवेंशन की बात होती है. You see, when we talk of diabetes, we talk of prevention. When we talk of heart disease, we talk of prevention. When we talk of other non-communicable diseases, तो आप कोई ऐसे फैक्टर सिर्फ हमें बताएं कि जो प्रिवेंशन के लिए हो. Thank you.
So, I can add to that. I think you have picked up on a very important point. हमारे पास data ही नहीं है, right? Prevention तो बाद में आती है, prevalence का data ही नहीं है. So, when we talk about numbers, कि mental health की क्या issues हैं, कितना prevalent है पाकिस्तान में, हमारे पास numbers ही नहीं है. We quote numbers from other cultures, other societies, other countries. So the first and the foremost thing is that all of the hypotheses that we are discussing need to be experimentally through proper research, they need to be proven and documented. Okay? So I think a lot of researchers need to come on board and start discussing all these questions. Talking about what you were mentioning about how to kind of not raise a boy who's insecure. Basically, a question, है ना? So basically, how to prevent having that power dynamic in the room, so that the next generation is not butting heads with that dynamic. यही सवाल है basically, right? So you guys can talk about that now.
Well, I think Mariam's right. You know, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of research from this region, and this is one of the reasons why we're speaking about this today. This is one of the reasons why starting a dialogue on therapy in South Asian culture is so important, that it might raise other more intricate dialogues to begin. It might raise areas of research. It might raise all these things that we are kind of fumbling with when we're trying to apply integration here. I think the closest answer that I can give you is for prevention is therapy. And that's because, again, I want to stress that therapy, it's about awareness. It's about what's happening within us, what's happening within our family system. I wonder what the ripple effect of having a generation or two of people in therapy might do. And again, we need data for that. But so many people, I can't stress the number of people who have approached me with mental health questions, but wanting to become therapists, that it made me think, what is happening? And one of the things that I concluded was, well, it's not really possible that suddenly everyone wants to be in one single profession. It's just that as a society, as individuals, we're experiencing some kind of lack of internal awareness, and we're desperate for that knowledge. We're desperate to know how. Or if we find out a little bit of how, we're desperate to spread it. So there is some kind of dearth there. And I know that doesn't quite answer the question of prevention. Maybe that's because we don't have a solid answer here.
I think that it can be taken in many ways also, you know. So these guys touched on one thing. Prevention is, so looking at what's happening in the society, you know, is one way of actually identifying the causes and then kind of working through to the prevention. So the list is numerous. The society has changed in the past decade, like it's changed too much. From when I was growing up, I have a niece who's 2 years old. She can operate an iPhone. Mujhe phone mila tha at 21, you know. So you can imagine the difference. So there are many, many reasons, and I think as people are coming in, again, a lot of research needs to be done on this. As practitioners, we need to reflect on the trends that are coming in, which are the causes where these disruptions are happening, and people are actually reaching out to professionals to talk about what's on their mind, their stresses, all of it. And I think that would help us kind of, you know, get to that place of prevention too.
And then that kind of awareness, it can actually have a ripple effect with things like legislation.
Right. So I'm really sorry, but we've run out of time for further questions. But
अच्छा बोल
चल
बोल दे यहाँ भी बहुत questions हैं.
But please make it a short question.
Or short answer. More short answer than a short question.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nazar. Achha, we have always been very confused about our traditions, our culture, our custom and psychology. For example, एक तरफ हमें बताया जाता है कि जिन and इस तरह की चीज़ें they exist, and एक तरफ हमें बताया जाता है these are hallucinations and delusions and etc. So what's the right thing? Because जब आप काउंसलर के पास जाते हैं, आप थेरेपिस्ट के पास जाते हैं, क्लिनिकल साइकोलॉजिस्ट के पास जाते हैं, वो आपको बताता है कि these are delusions और these are hallucinations, लेकिन अंदर ही अंदर हम भी उस सिस्टम में ब्रॉट अप किए होते हैं, क्योंकि हमें भी बताया होता है कि सो जो जिन्न आ जाएगा, ये आ जाएगा, वी नो हमारा रिलीजन कहता है एंड एवरीथिंग अबाउट दैट. सो व्हाट्स द राइट थिंग? व्हाई आर वी कंफ्यूज्ड इन दिस ट्रेडिशंस, कल्चर एंड साइकोलॉजी, डिल्यूजन, hallucinations? सॉरी.
ऐसा करें 2-3 और सवाल ले लें, हम आखिर में कंक्लूड कर लेते हैं थोड़ा सा.
No,
वहाँ
we
से भी
have.
हाथ उठ रहा है, वहाँ से भी उठ रहा है, 2-3 ले लें. and then
We don't have time. No, we don't have time.
तो फिर उसको एक one liner
Okay, who wants to address this question?
So we're going to end the session, and if for all of you who have questions, you can come join our panelists towards the end, and you can ask them questions directly, if that works.
Okay, just to quickly answer your question since you asked, I think this is coming from a more psychiatric model. And this is the confusion between schizophrenia, some kind of being possessed by a jinn. And that is really just about basic mental health awareness, which is, it's taking place, it needs to happen on a larger scale. When that happens, people can access more resources.
Okay. So thank you for coming to our talk. Please join me in thanking our panelists for today.